You're live. Who's live anyway? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What You Reading For. This is the sixth episode that I have done of this live stream series where we talk about books that I've read and I let you guys know what I'm reading next so that hopefully you guys have a chance to read it before I uh, do the next episode. Um, I have the next book that we're going to be talking about, as you guys can tell by the title and the thumbnail, and also because I announced it a while ago. Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm very excited to talk about this book. Um, so why don't we just jump right into it? I want to let you guys know that I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Drognath. I stream video games over there and hang out in Discord and chill with the homies. I also have allergies right now, so I'm kind of like dying low key. Anyhow, let's talk some Dune. So I this is gonna be probably a pretty short episode. First of all, I think if I just sat here and kind of described all of the like plot points, like all of the events that happen in Dune, it would just take forever. And if I tried to explain every like lore bit, it would just this episode could run into infinity. So I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit concise. I might do a little bit of synopsisizing, but in general, I kind of wanted to stick to the meat of the book. Um, so a little background on my kind of history with Dune. I actually uh, so I first like encountered Dune. My a family member gave me this book and the two sequels, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, both of which I plan on reading at some point. He gave me these books and kind of was like, "You would love these." They are, I think these particular printings are from like the mid 80s, the 31st printing maybe. I absolutely love these. I mean, these are like very classic, mass market paperbacks. They're in total shit condition. I think my relative actually got them from a yard sale, but eventually they ended up in my hands. Um, so that was my first introduction to Dune. I read maybe like 50 pages. I was probably like 12 or 13, which honestly, might have been a good age to read it had I gotten back in, or had I gotten into it back then, because that's around the age of the main character, Paul. But I kind of just bounced right off of it, honestly. It just wasn't the type of thing that I was interested in reading at that point, in my life at least, and it just it was a little. The book kind of starts off really. It starts off in a world that is very different from our own, and so, and this is sometimes something I struggle with a lot of. Uh, I struggle with this with a lot of fantasy and science fiction, just because it takes some stretching of the imagination to kind of encapsulate what the world the book is trying to build. It's easier for me now, which is funny because you would think when you're younger you have a better imagination, but honestly, I just am able to picture things a lot easier now, if that makes any sense. Um, uh, which I'll get into in a second. Anyway, so I tried to read it back then, couldn't do it. Put him down. I think I tried to pick it up like one more time, maybe in high school. Like I might have been like 16 or 17. I tried to read it again, and it bounced off of it once more. And then didn't think about Dune at all until maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. A friend of mine ran me and a couple of friends through a adventure using the Dune Adventures in the Imperium RPG rule set from Modifius, I believe, is the company that puts out that game. It's a role-playing game. You play as characters in the Dune universe. I didn't know anything about the Dune universe because I had never read the books, had never seen the movies. The first movie was out at that point. The first Villeneuve movie. Obviously, the David Lynch movie had been out for years, but I wasn't even really aware of it. Um, and The Villeneuve movie was out. I hadn't seen it. I had heard that it was good, just didn't I didn't even really think about it. So I played that in that game and was like, dude, this world is awesome. And my friend did a really great job of bringing the world to life and letting us kind of explore in the world of Dune. And so after that adventure ended, I was like really compelled to read the books. Now, it took me a while. It took me like 2 years, basically. I just finished Dune back in January. So like 2 months ago, I finished Dune. So it took me a while to actually get around to the book. And subsequently, since uh, since playing that game, I have seen both movies. I went and saw Dune Part Two in theaters, and I saw it twice. I went with just me and two friends, and then went with a larger group of friends a little bit later because I loved it that much. The Denis Villeneuve's uh, Dune movies are fantastic. I really am hoping to read Dune Messiah before the third movie comes out because presumably Dune Messiah will be encompassing all of that book. Anyhow, this is all just background on like what I went into this book with. I had seen the movies, I had played a role-playing game set in the universe, but very recent. I don't really have a lot of like. I still felt like a relative newbie when it came to the world of Dune entering this book. There is so much to wrap your head around the lore of this world that even having watched the movies and played a game based on it, it just feels like there's still so much to delve into. Um, and even playing in that world, I got the impression that there was a lot of things that even our adventure was not touching on. Um, so Dune, this book, cover to cover, I think is like 500 pages or so, somewhere in the realm of 500 pages. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I am. It's not surprising to me whatsoever that this is considered one of the kind of science fiction classics, or it's considered to be among the best, or at least it's certainly most popular. I think there's contention around what would be considered the best, but certainly the most popular, and in my opinion, one of the best that I've read of the science fiction genre. It is a certifiable banger. Um, I am sympathetic to the criticisms of this book because there are some issues, and the criticisms thereof I don't think are without merit. Um, for one, I think one of the big criticisms that I want to address right away is that Paul Atreides, the main character of Dune, is kind of the he is kind of the ultimate example of the kind of special boy trope of fantasy and science fiction. It's not I'm calling it special boy. It's not exclusive to men, but I think fantasy sometimes has uh, a way of portraying the main character as sort of like this unimaginably powerful and skilled uh, person. Um, Paul Atreides is kind of like the pinnacle of this, where it's like he is not only does he sort of possess the power of kind of like prescience or or sorry, I'm getting messages and it's distracting me. Um, he has the power to kind of like know where fate is sort of pointing things. He has the power of the voice, which allows him to control people, so to speak, which he's given by his mother, who gives him sort of parts of Bene Gesserit training. The Bene Gesserits are these. It's the sisterhood of space witches that kind of control intergalactic slash interplanetary uh, politics, and the fate of humanity basically is in their hands. Paul is the child of one of these Bene Gesserit space witches, and he is just very powerful. Not to mention, he's also rich. He's also he begins the book rich. At least he's born of a kind of royal esque family, and because of this, he's royalty, and he's trained in swordsmanship. He's trained in all kinds of different things. He's trained in survival, sort of like outdoor survival. Uh, uh, he knows ahead of time that he is coming to this planet, Dune. I guess I should mention Dune is a desert planet. It's called Arrakis. It's a planet of almost entirely, or maybe entirely, desert. It's very deadly, and he's sort of knows going in that he's going to eventually end up on this planet, and that his family is destined to rule this planet. So a large criticism of Dune, it kind of revolves around that Paul just kind of feels like he's the main character, and sometimes it's uninteresting to read about someone who's so overpowered, for lack of a better term, so imbued with the author's want for them to be successful, that they're just like given so much power that feels undue or feels unrealistic, I guess you could say. Um, I I largely agree with this criticism, though I honestly think that for some reason, and I don't know if it's the my love of this world, or my impression of Villeneuve's movies, that's kind of coloring my opinion on this. But for some reason with Paul, it just works for me. For some reason, Paul Atreides is that guy. Like, as much as it kind of feels cliche and feels kind of stupid, Paul just is that guy. He's a young prince who is wise and charismatic, and he is strong, and he's fast, and he's like all of these different qualities you could want for a hero. And typically when you're writing a hero or a protagonist of a story, you want to give them one or two of these traits, but then also have some flaws so that it humanizes them. And Paul is not without flaws, by the way. I think Paul is sometimes a little arrogant. I think Paul is sometimes obsessed with power. Paul is he's still sometimes just a kid. Sometimes he just displays immaturity, I guess you could say. Um, but in general, yes, he is like he is just um, well, he's the Kwisatz Haderach. Well, I actually personally I don't know if he is that. For context, for people who've never read the book, the Kwisatz Haderach is kind of this foretold person that is being brought into existence by the Bene Gesserit. They're kind of bringing this person, this powerful mind, into existence so that it can do something. I don't really remember what it's meant to do, but it's this really powerful and influent this person who will be very powerful and very influential. I actually am not 100% certain or convinced that Paul is actually the Kwisatz Haderach. I would need to read more to verify or disprove that notion. But it certainly feels like he is. Everything that could be going in the right direction for Paul is going in the right direction. He, other than the fact that his entire family dies, or most of his family and court dies, a huge portion of House Atreides is killed on Arrakis by their rivals, the Harkonnen house, and so I guess what I can say is that this notion of Paul sort of being the all powerful boy, special boy, not entirely without. Uh, there's a lot of stock in that, or it's certainly you can make that criticism. Another big criticism that I've seen of Dune is um, that it's a little too the writing is not clear enough, or that it's that the sorry, my dog is scratching himself in a really funny way, and it's distracting me. Um, the writing that Frank Herbert does is kind of flowery in some ways when the reader kind of really wants to know what's happening. When Paul is kind of going into his mind palace, so to speak, and envisioning things that might happen and various paths that his fate might take. The way that it's written and the way that it's described can often be a little unclear and inconcise, if that's a word. And so it ends up leaving the reader a little confused. That also I can see where the criticisms for that come in. I personally thought it was kind of cool. It makes it a little bit more cerebral, I guess you could say, than a lot of science fiction is. It's not very direct. It is a little poetic and a little flowery, and it makes Paul's mind powers a little bit more real feeling in some ways, because if you were kind of going down this mind tunnel and you're seeing all the possible realities laying before you, it might feel a little intangible and a little um, surreal, I guess you could say. Um, so I don't necessarily find that criticism is totally deserved, or at least the criticism might be accurate, but I disagree that it's not effective. And I certainly never uh, felt so confused as to what was happening that I was like lost, I guess you could say. One criticism that I myself have, and I have seen this elsewhere, and I would say I largely agree with it, is that there are huge segments of the book where they're just kind of journeying, and which is not necessarily a bad thing. I love a good journey in a book. I loved The Hobbit, which is all about a journey, right? Journeying in general. We're going to talk about Dracula in a few uh, episodes. I'll talk about that in a second, but there's some journeying in that book as well. I don't necessarily have a problem with big journeys in books, but there were parts of Dune that I just kind of felt like, man, they're going across the sand and then they get to this sietch, and sietches are kind of underground towns on Dune where people live because it's so hot outside. There's two suns. Dune gets so thoroughly baked by its two suns that people need to live underground to kind of like survive in that ecosystem. Um, so there's a lot of talking about uh, journeying across huge gulfs of desert, and then going into a siege, and then they talk for a little while, and then they leave the siege and they go across the desert for a little while, and then they go to another siege, and then they talk for a little while. Um, it just there are some parts where I'm just like, man, this is boring. um, Now I still enjoyed those parts because the dialogue is really good. The characters I really enjoyed. Again, this might be a little colored by the portrayals of these characters from the Villeneuve movies. The characters in those movies are so great that they're my mental image of them might be coloring the way I read this book. I fully admit that. However, the characters are so compelling that when they're just sitting in a siege talking to each other, it's to me, I think, very compelling writing. So I wasn't necessarily totally disengaged from those parts of the book, though I will say they went on a little bit longer than they might have needed to. I think there's probably a solid 50 to 100 pages of this book that you could probably chop out. It doesn't need to be this long to get across what it wants to get across. And largely what it wants to get across um, is the danger, I guess you could say, of political despotism or religious despotism, of kind of eschewing all humanity in order to follow the whims of a political or religious leader. Um, by the end of this book, Paul is essentially a like god king of Dune. As I've come to understand, one of the books in the series is literally called God Emperor. I don't know if that's referring to Paul. I'm not really sure, but in general, Paul feels like at the end of the book that he has gotten a little too big for his britches, maybe. And maybe we'll see the way that plays out in the second book, which I'm very excited to read. And as I'm talking about it, I'm kind of like, maybe I should just read Dune Messiah. But that'll probably be that's probably months away if I'm being honest. Um, so for people who haven't read Dune, you absolutely should read it. I think it's 100% worth reading. The movies I think are worth watching as well. But I they're the movies are great. I think they're great faithful adaptations of the books so far. It's the two movies that have come out from Villeneuve are faithful adaptations of the first Dune book. I will say though that the books are worth reading just because there's a little flavor missing and a little context missing, and there's some stuff like they completely ignore some of the problematic aspects of Dune, which is probably for the best for mainstream audiences, and certainly there were parts of Dune that made me feel a little uncomfy, I guess you could say. Um, but I think it all kind of it makes it feel like a true sci-fi universe. Some of these uh, politic or not political, these kind of like some of these things that just you wouldn't find in modern sci-fi writing. I feel um, there's a lot of sexism and a lot of like misogyny, and there's a lot of um, I guess like kind of uh, there's just a lot going on in Dune, and I think that some of the more kind of quote unquote problematic things about it lend to how different it feels from reality. Um, I don't know if that's a defense of it necessarily as much as it is just kind of like it is what it is, and I think that it would be how do I say this without sounding crazy? It just makes it feel more realistic, I guess you could say. In the world of Dune, these things feel realistic. It doesn't make them right, and it doesn't make them like something you should want in real life, but it does make it realistic. I feel this is kind of the weirdly enough, Dune shares a lot of blood, I feel like, with the Warhammer universe, the 40K universe, in that like, you know, Space Marines in 40K and the Imperium of man in general is like incredibly problematic and incredibly fascistic and horrifying. But that's kind of what makes it compelling and kind of what makes it feel like it could be humanity's future. Especially, I mean, I don't think I need to tell anybody what the political reality of our day and age is, but certainly something like Dune or Warhammer feels more realistic to our future than something like Star Trek. In that way, 40K is kind of like the antithesis or kind of equal opposite of Star Trek in that it feels in Star Trek, you know, it's humanity kind of going out to the stars and living in peace and trying to find the most humane way to do everything. In Warhammer, you know, there is nothing but war. In Dune, it kind of feels like that, but to a more subtle degree, I guess you could say. Um, I'm trying to stay on topic here. I don't have much more to say about the book other than that it was really, really good. I really enjoyed reading it. I can't wait to read more. I can't wait for the third movie to come out. I have a feeling that if the third movie in Villeneuve's trilogy is as good as the first two, or maybe better, that this trilogy will go down as almost on par with like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think it's an incredibly faithful adaptation of the books that are mind-bogglingly accurate to the source material, and in some ways kind of improve it maybe a little bit. Who knows? Maybe I think that the Villeneuve Dune movies are even better than the books. I don't know. Did I say that? No, I didn't. Um, so great book. Just all in all, very good book. I really liked it. I think everybody should check it out. If you're a science fiction fan, Dune is required reading. It 100% is. There are some people I know of some science fiction readers that have maybe a little bit more refined palates than mine when it comes to science fiction that don't really like Dune as much. I think in my opinion, Dune is required reading. Boom. There you go. That is the episode on Dune. I need to go take my dog for a walk. What I will say here is that the next book, the next book that we will be talking about is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I have a lot to say about this book. I'm very excited to do this episode. After that, we will be doing Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. That should I'm like halfway through right now. It's taking me forever to get this book done. Dracula. After that, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I know everyone's so excited to know what I thought about this book, and you're gonna get my thoughts. I already finished it actually. So why are we doing it after Dracula? Don't worry about it. That's just the way my brain works. But Court of Thorns and Roses coming up shortly. And the only book after that that I have planned, the next thing on my reading list, and I haven't started yet, is Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in America. This is the second volume of a collection of letters from Hunter S. Thompson to various people. I read the first volume quite a long time ago and really, really liked it. And I'm excited to see where this second volume goes. This is us getting back to nonfiction. Now it is Hunter S. Thompson, so fiction and nonfiction are kind of commingled in his writing style. But this will be the book after A Court of Thorns and Roses. And after that, I'm not sure what we're gonna do. I have a couple of books here that I'm definitely very interested in reading. We still want to get to Nixon Land at some point. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson still in there. I just got a copy a while back of Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, which I am like very excited to read. Um, but a lot of options, man. There's so much to read, and I plan on reading all of it. So I hope that you've been enjoying coming with me on my journey of trying to read more. I'm trying to read 26 books this year. Um, right? Is that right? Yeah, 26, because there's 52 weeks in a year, and I want to read a book every 2 weeks. That's the goal. Whether it will happen or not, we shall see. But thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you like hearing me talk about books, please like this video. Subscribe so that you get notified when I go live to talk about books. Um, Make sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Dune. And go follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Drognath. Check me out on Blue Sky. I'm sure if you go to Blue Sky and look up Drognath, you'll be able to find me. Um, Follow me on TikTok. I haven't made any TikToks in a while. Hopefully, when I do my next YouTube video game playthrough, uh, I will be posting clips on the TikTok. Possibly. I love all of you so much. Thank you so much for watching, checking it out. And yeah, we'll see you next time.